for joining me. I bring in news stories making the rounds at this hour. The headline says Russia holds combat exercises over Baltic Sea. Premier Lee stresses on better global cooperation. Pakistan voices concern over Biden-Modi statement. Switzerland says country hub for Russian Chinese spies, and Ukrainian troops advancing, says Zelensky. Stay with me for these and more stories. Russia has begun strategic fighter jet drills over the Baltic Sea with the aim of testing preparedness to perform combat and other special operations, the country's defense ministry has said, a day after Moscow said its jets had scrambled to intercept United Kingdom military planes over the Black Sea. The ministry announced that the crews of the Su-27 fighter jets of the Baltic Fleet fired from airborne weapons at cruise missiles and mock enemy aircraft, adding that as well as improving skills, Russian fighter pilots are on round-the-clock combat duty guarding the airspace of Russia's Kaliningrad enclave. Wedged between Poland and Lithuania on the Baltic coast, Kaliningrad is Moscow's westernmost state and was part of Germany until the end of the World War II. Given to the Soviet Union at the Potsdam Conference in 1945, the enclave has roughly 1 million residents, mainly Russians, but also a small number of Ukrainians, Poles, and Lithuanians. Russia said last year that it had deployed warplanes armed with state-of-the-art Kinzhal hypersonic missiles to the Chaklovsk airbase in Kaliningrad as part of its strategic deterrent. The Russian Defense Ministry on Monday said that it has scrambled 2 fighter jets as UK Typhoon warplanes approached its border above the Black Sea, and that the planes had turned around and distanced themselves from the Russian border following intervention from Russia's fighter planes. The Typhoon jets were accompanying an RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft, the Defense Ministry said. The RAF Typhoons launched to monitor the Russian aircraft when they do not talk to air traffic agencies, making them a flight safety hazard. The UK Defence Ministry said in a statement on Sunday. The UK's Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, said these intercepts are a stark reminder of the value of collective defence and deterrence provided by NATO. On economy, Li Qiang, Chinese premier, has called for more communication and exchange to avoid confusion in his remarks at the opening of this year's summer's Davos in Tianjin, the first in-person event in 3 years following COVID-19 pandemic. The 3-day summit, which got commenced on Tuesday, is hosted by the World Economic Forum, but will emphasize heavily on China's place in the world and fears about how the world economy can move forward in a progressively fractious world, according to the agenda. Li told delegates it was time to support globalization and deeper economic cooperation. In the West, some people are hyping up what is called cutting reliance and de-risking, Li said. These two concepts are a false proposition because the development of economic globalization is such that the world economy has become a common entity in which you and I are both intermingled. The economies of many countries are blended with each other, rely on each other, make accomplishments because of one another, and develop together. This is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. The summit parallels Beijing's self-branding as a champion of multilateralism in a bid to differentiate itself from the United States, where protectionist trade policies directed at China are on the increase. The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden is anticipated to finalize an executive order in the coming weeks to limit ongoing U.S. investment to China in a critical fields like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced semiconductors due to national security concerns. The executive order has reportedly been in the making for 2 years and will complement a separate bill before the U.S. Congress that, if passed, will also limit investment in industries like pharmaceuticals and cars. Amidst the legislative activity, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen may travel to China next month to meet her Chinese counterpart He Feng and carry out damage control, reports said on Tuesday, citing unnamed officials. Yellen has said targeted U.S. strategies like investment restrictions are motivated solely by our concerns about our security and values and not to gain competitive economic advantage over Beijing. She also had called for a de-risking approach to China that will permit U.S.-China trade to continue rather than a disastrous decoupling that will further divide the two superpowers. Yellen will be the second cabinet-level U.S. official to visit China in as many months if the trip goes ahead, following a journey by Secretary of State Antony Blinken earlier this month after differences over issues such as Taiwan, semiconductors, and an alleged Chinese spy balloon flying above the U.S. heightened tensions. Pakistan's foreign ministry has subpoenaed the United States Embassy's deputy chief of mission to voice out concern over a statement last week by U.S. President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi that called on Pakistan to ensure its territory was not used as a base for attacks by armed groups. The U.S.-India statement was released on Friday after a meeting between Biden and Modi at the White House and received criticism from Pakistan, which called it contrary to diplomatic norms. It was stressed that the United States should refrain from issuing statements that may be construed as an encouragement of India's baseless and politically motivated narrative against Pakistan, Pakistan's Foreign Office said in a statement on Monday. It was also emphasized that counter-terrorism cooperation between Pakistan and the U.S. had been progressing well and that an enabling environment centered around trust and understanding was imperative to further solidifying Pakistan-U.S. ties. Mark Miller, U.S. State Department spokesperson, said, according to reports in a daily news briefing, that Pakistan had taken significant measures to counter armed groups, but said Washington advocated for more to be done. At the same time, however, we have also been consistent on the importance of Pakistan continuing to take steps to permanently dismantle all terrorist groups, including Lashkar-e-Taiba or LET and Jaish Mohammed or JEM and their various front organizations, and we will raise the issue regularly with Pakistani officials, he said. LET is the group blamed for the 2008 Mumbai attacks in which over 160 people were killed, while JEM claimed responsibility for a 2019 bombing in India-administered Kashmir that killed 40 Indian paramilitary personnel. Relations between India and Pakistan have been fraught for years. Since independence from Britain in 1947, India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars, 2 of them over the Muslim-majority Himalayan region of Kashmir, which they both claim in full, but rule in part. Pakistan's army on Saturday claimed 2 civilians were killed by Indian forces in firing across the line of control, de facto border in Kashmir, the first such conflict since the ceasefire in 2021 between the 2 nuclear-armed South Asian neighbors. On politics, the Federal Intelligence Service, FIS, Switzerland's major intelligence agency, says Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has made the country an espionage hotspot, with at least a third of the 220 officials Russia has accredited in the country suspected of being spies. While Russian spying elsewhere in Europe and in North America had been weakened by expulsions, Russian agents continued to operate in Bern, the Swiss capital, and at Moscow's mission to the United Nations in Geneva, the FIS said in its annual report. In a report released on Monday, it said in Europe, Switzerland is one of the states with the highest numbers of Russian intelligence officers operating under diplomatic cover, in part due to its role as a host to international organizations. The United Nations has its European headquarters in Geneva, and the city also holds several United Nations agencies and international organizations. Hundreds of diplomats are posted in the city or regularly gather there for key meetings. Of the approximately 220 people accredited as diplomatic or techno-administrative staff in the Russian missions in Geneva and Bern, probably at least a third work for the Russian intelligence services, FIS Chief Christian Dorsey said, according to reports. The Swiss Secret Service, which has 450 staff, said the war in Ukraine was forcing it to extend its monitoring to areas that had formerly received little attention, such as Turkey and India, because Russia had been using companies in such countries for procurement. While China is also believed to have dozens of spies at its diplomatic missions in Switzerland, their number is significantly less than Russia's, the agency said. China's agents rely more on non-diplomatic cover, the FIS said, and are mainly described officially as scientists, journalists, or business executives. Dorsey said he expected China's intelligence cooperation to become stronger in Europe, supported by growing resources. The FIS chief said, "We are doing the maximum on the ground to show the lines not to be crossed," adding that the espionage operations had a negative effect on Geneva's international importance and were detrimental to Switzerland's credibility. Now, on talking Russia-Ukraine war, Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian president, has visited Ukrainian forces fighting on the front line that runs through the eastern Donetsk region and the south of the country, decorating troops on a day in which he said his forces had advanced in all directions. In an upbeat message to his nation after visiting the front line, Zelensky said, "This is a happy day. I wish the guys more days like this. It was a busy day, a lot of emotions. I was honored to award our warriors, to thank them personally, to shake their hands," Zelensky said in his nightly video address, which was released in the early hours of Tuesday. The Ukrainian president also said he has spoken about weapon supplies with United States President Joe Biden. "Today, I was in the area where these weapons will give more power, more protection to Ukrainians' lives and bring our victory closer. This is the main thing. All our land will be free. All of it," he added. The president's office posted 4 videos of Zelensky's journey on Monday, which he said covered hundreds of kilometers and appeared to present encounters with his troops in at least 3 locations on the front lines. The Ukrainian leader's interactions with his forces and positive comments on Ukraine's ongoing counter-offensive contrasted starkly with the chaos in Russia following the short-lived weekend revolts by the Russian Wagner Group's mercenary forces. One location visited by Zelensky was in the eastern Donetsk region, which has been a central point of fighting in the 16-month-old war. Another was located in what was described as the Bernivka sector in the south of the country, in areas where Ukrainian forces have captured villages. A third location was also on the southern front, further to the west. On Monday, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said that Ukrainian forces had regained control over Rivnopol, a village west of a cluster of settlements recaptured in recent offensive operations in the Donetsk region. The village appeared to be the 9th retaken by the Ukraine forces this month. In the past week, 17 additional square kilometers, 10.5 square miles of the Russian-occupied Zaporizhia region have been recaptured, Maliar also said on Telegram, while a total of 130 square kilometers, almost 81 square miles of Russian-occupied territory had been liberated since the start of the counter-offensive in early June. On more stories, business and economy, Tunisia battles advance under bulky government. In Tunisia and across much of North Africa, the whole populations remaining hooked to the giant, sclerotic bureaucracies that were left by their former colonial rulers and remain a central tenet of domestic politics today. In Tunisia's case, the costs of that bureaucracy risk pushing it towards bankruptcy. European colonial bureaucracies created government jobs and, by extension, an administrator class dependent on their overseas sponsor. Private enterprise in Tunisia, at least, was largely neglected, leaving no room for the small and medium-sized enterprises that typically make up the backbone of most countries' economies. Independence did little to correct that, as did the years that followed the revolution in 2011 that was brought on by frustration at the dwindling opportunities for employment within the state and its allied enterprises. With unemployment as then and now a key driver of social unrest, successive administrations turned to the welfare state to address their citizens' aspirations. Job creation slowed down post-revolution as the economy failed to produce sufficient opportunities, particularly for university graduates and the prime working age population, reads a World Bank note. While the state sought to compensate citizens through public employment creation and large consumer and producer subsidies, it has yet to tackle the profound distortions holding back the economy. Tunisia presently has one of the highest rates of public spending in the world relative to the size of its economy, with a solid needed loan by the International Monetary Fund (IMF) largely dependent on its reform. Subsidies on items such as bread, coffee and fuel make up a significant portion of that spending, 8% of the country's gross domestic product (GDP) last year. However, much of the remaining cost goes to public sector salaries, primarily administrative jobs in the country's ministries and allied state-owned enterprises. Traditional areas of government spending such as health, infrastructure or social care appear for the most part to be overlooked almost entirely. In Sudan says for Eid, RSF declares 2-day ceasefire. The commander of the Sudanese paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, has announced a 2-day unilateral ceasefire for the Muslim festival of Eid al-Adha. Mohammed Hamdan Hamdetsi Dagalo said on Monday in an audio recording posted on social media, "We are declaring a unilateral ceasefire except for self-defense situations on the eve of Eid and on the day of Eid al-Adha." Hamedi Hameti expressed hope the Eid holiday will provide an opportunity for reconciliation among the Sudanese people. Acknowledging the challenging humanitarian conditions caused by the war, he said, "We hope to emerge from the war more united and stronger." The Sudanese army has yet to comment on a potential ceasefire. Sudan has been ravaged by fighting between the army and the RSF since mid-April in a conflict that has killed at least 2,000 civilians and wounded thousands more. Khartoum and El Geneina have been the worst affected by the war that broke out on April 15th, though tensions and clashes worsened last week in other parts of Darfur and in Kordofan in the south. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, estimates the conflict has displaced almost 2 million people internally and more than 600,000 people have fled to neighboring countries. I'll bring you more stories after this time out. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Here are more stories from Nigeria. We begin with Discos awaits NRC's not to add tariff. On Monday, power distribution companies backtracked on their earlier announcement of a tariff surge expected to take effect from July 1st, 2023, as they stated that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission NERC is yet to approve the hike. Various public notices from some of the discos seen on Monday had said that the electricity tariff will be raised by about 30 to 40% for selected categories of consumers on July 1st, 2023. In a public service announcement from the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, for instance, the DISCO had said effective July 1st, 2023, please be informed that there will be an upward review to the electricity tariff influenced by the fluctuating exchange rate. Under the MYTO multi-year tariff order 2022 guidelines, the previously set exchange rate of 441 naira per dollar may now be revised to approximately 750 naira per $1, which will have an impact on the tariffs associated with your electricity consumption. However, on Monday, in an appeal by the same AEDC issued, the firm asked its consumers to disregard the planned tariff increase as approval for such an increment had not been received. It said, and I quote, "Please disregard the circulating miscommunication regarding the review of electricity tariffs. Be informed that no approval for such increments has been received. We regret any inconvenience," the AEDC stated in its latest announcement. A senior official in NERC confirmed that the regulator had not been given the discourse not to announce the hike in tariffs. The commission did not give them such approval. The official spoke on condition of anonymity due to lack of approval, stated. A former spokesperson of the AEDC and seasoned expert in the sector, Olabode Fadipe, reacting to the development, said NERC never publishes any position or makes any official statement. It is the DISCOs that does that. Once the DISCOs receive approval from NERC, they effect the adjustment straight away. When the Assistant Manager of Communications, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Mary Anave, was reached out for comment, she dismissed an imminent increase on tariffs. However, when Sani was contacted, he declined to respond to both calls and messages. A minor electricity tariff is slated to hold every 6 months. The last review was carried out in December. Still on the news, Buhari's ex-aide says why subsidy removal delayed. Garba Shehu, ex-spokesperson to the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, has formally responded to the removal of fuel subsidy by President Bola Tinubu upon his inauguration on May 29, 2023. Shehu justified Buhari's refusal to remove the petrol subsidy while his 8-year administration lasted, just as it emerged that data from the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL) showed that the national oil company had a whopping 3.73 trillion naira in unpaid petrol subsidy arrears as at May this year. This was just as petrol racketeering markets in some West African nations, including Cameroon, Benin Republic and Togo, have crashed following Nigeria's decision to remove its very costly fuel subsidy on May 29, 2023. Justifying his refusal to remove the petrol subsidy while his 80 years administration lasted, Shehu stated that if Buhari had implemented the fuel subsidy removal policy, the ruling All Progressives Congress APC and Tinubu would have lost the last general elections held in February and March 2023. Shehu declared in a statement issued yesterday, "We must be politically honest with ourselves. The Buhari administration in its last days could not have gone the whole way because the APC had an election to win, and that would have been the case with any political party that was seeking election for another term with a new principle at its head." However, he lauded the measures taken so far by the new administration in implementing the removal of petrol subsidy and attempt to unify the Naira exchange rate. The statement was in response to persistent queries by some critics who had questioned why it took Tinubu only days to remove the petrol subsidy, whereas Buhari didn't do so for several years. According to him, successive polls showed that the ruling party would have lost the 2023 election if the Petroleum Industry Act containing the petrol subsidy removal was implemented before then. And finally, on the news, Tinubu renames airports after Buhari and 14 others. On Monday, the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria FAN revealed that government has approved the renaming of some airports after some prominent Nigerians. FAN, in a statement in Abuja, said this was announced in a memo released by the Federal Ministry of Aviation dated June 1st, 2023, and signed by Mrs. Joke Olatunji for the Director of Airport Operations. The statement noted that President Tinubu renamed the airports as part of reforms of the aviation sector. Hadi Sirika, ex-aviation minister, had earlier made the revelation few days before the handover of President Muhammadu Buhari administration. The Maiduguri airport was renamed after the immediate past President Muhammadu Buhari. Port Harcourt airport was renamed after the late nationalist Obafemi Awolowo, while the Nasarawa airport immortalized the late founder of the Sokoto Caliphate, Usman Dan Fodio, according to the release. Also, the Benin airport was renamed after the late Oba of Benin, Oba Akenzua II. Ebonyi airport renamed after the late Senate President Chuba Okadigbo, and the Ibadan airport after the late Premier of the Old Western Region, Ladoke Akintola. Olatunji further said Akure airport had been renamed Olumuyiwa Bernard Aliyu, Dutse airport renamed after Mohammed Nuhu Sanusi, and Gombe airport renamed after Brigadier Zakari Mai Malari. Others are Kaduna Airport, Hassan Usman Katsina, Makodi Airport, Joseph Surwan Tarka, Mina Airport, Malam Abubakar Imam, Osubi Airport, Alfred Dates Pief, Port Harcourt Airport, Obafemi Jeremiah Awolowo, Yola Airport, Lamido Aliyu Mustafa. And also, the federal government has made Wednesday and Thursday public holiday for the Eid celebrations. On a recap of major stories says Russia holds combat exercises over Baltic Sea. Premier Lee stresses on better global cooperation. Pakistan voices concern over Biden-Modi statement. Switzerland says country hub for Russian Chinese spies, and Ukrainian troops advancing, says Zelensky. That's all on the news. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Tureki.